So this first video is a conversation with 5 other panelists about the Reproductive Healthcare Bill of 2019, which is currently on the Senate floor and was sponsored by Senator Susan Kihika. I received so many petitions on, my WhatsApp. Sign this petition. It's the abortion bill and other such things. And I went through it myself, and I feel that there's so much misinformation being spread, and so people are making decisions against their best self-interest. So I thought it would be a good idea to bring on a couple of people and have a conversation about it, unpack what is in it, and demystify some of the myths. I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you have any questions, please email me and I'll get back to you. And engage with me in the comments or in my email. Thank you so much.
Welcome, everybody. So Meggie is a medical doctor and a global health specialist whose work currently focuses on research and policy engagement around social health and sexual and reproductive health. You may have seen her recently on, was it NTV, Meggie? Talking about CSV. Yeah, you can look her up. Next panelist is Silvia. Silvia Muturi is a friend of the deaf community and serves them in a capacity as a sign language specialist. She saw the challenges that deaf girls go through, and this inspired her passion to start a movement called Deaf Girls Rock, where she empowers them with skills, knowledge, and expertise to be confident girls who can achieve anything. Thank you, Silvia, for being here. Our next panelist is Kendi Kaburu, who is a lawyer and a policy and governance scholar and a person who believes in social change and doing that by changing one mindset at a time. Fun fact, Kendi is the reason that I started this channel. Not so much started, but I got the final push because she had, so Kendi and I are friends from a while back, and she put up a status update about the reproductive health bill and how she was getting these petitions to sign against it. And I was getting the same things. And so she was talking about it, and I thought, oh, so it's not just me who's thinking about this. So let me read it and actually get into it. So thank you, Kendi. Next, we have Dr. Christopher Obwaka. He's a consultant obstetrician gynecologist and is passionate about eliminating maternal mortality in Africa and also about educating women on taking a proactive approach in managing their reproductive health. If you Google him, you will find him in a couple of videos. So this is not the only one you'll find him in. He is very, very good with giving information. And last on the panel, we have Bidian Nyamor. Is a volunteer at Respect and a member of the Policy and Advocacy Committee in the Commonwealth Youth Council. So Respect is a student organization that focuses on sexual and reproductive health care in young people. Yeah. So to begin with, I just wanted to start by looking at the bill itself. So the bill has 7 parts. So the first part is the preliminary part, which is just basically explaining the term. So it has what is like just basically all the terms. The second part talks about access to family planning services, which is, contraception, things like that. The third part talks about assisted reproduction. The fourth part talks about safe motherhood. The fifth part, which is, I think, the most controversial, talks about termination of pregnancy. The sixth part talks about confidentiality. It's actually, that's, I think, the smallest part. And then the seventh part, which is, again, another controversial issue, is the reproductive health of adolescents. So just to preface, we will cover specifically comprehensive sexuality education in another video, but we will touch on adolescent reproductive health care in this video. Okay, so I guess you can start with the discussion. So I just wanted to know for each of you, what is your opinion of this bill? And what for you is the most significant part on a personal or professional level? What is it for you? Open floor.
Let me start by saying that this bill is absolute gold. Oh my God, the gold itself. People sat down and brought us gold because first of all, surrogacy. I remember when we were in law school, we had this whole debate around whether surrogacy is really a thing in Kenya because there's no legal framework for surrogacy. and it has, I feel like the biggest part of the bill is actually about surrogacy, and that part has been overlooked by everything else. And also reproductive health, and the fact that it seeks to create a framework where the government, the county government and national government have a responsibility to provide contraceptive healthcare. That one I have a personal attachment to it, because I've had to pay for contraceptive pills which have been prescribed as medication for to manage endometriosis symptoms, but I had to pay out of pocket because then insurance doesn't really cover it, and they have the fact that there is no legal framework for it. Sort of, they just brush it and say, that one, we don't really care so much about it. So the fact that those two things have been highlighted in the bill makes me get very excited about it getting implemented and actually us feeling the impact of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe just to jump in, I think from a professional level, well, I think it sometimes it gets very intertwined. So I would say the main aspects of the bill which are very important to me are the aspect of reproductive health for adolescents and the termination of pregnancy, and mostly because I work around research in those areas. And when I was looking at how the bill has transformed from 2014 and then to the 2019 version, you can tell how different issues are coming into play and how they're evolving. So for example, in the aspect of the reproduction for adolescents, in the 2014 bill, it was very clear in terms of its strong support for comprehensive sexuality education, and that adolescents could be able to access sexual and reproductive health services without parental consent, which we know right now from research that that's one of the biggest barriers that adolescents have, being able to just go to a hospital and access those contraceptives or access even just information. It might not even be just information is a big challenge. However, now in the 2019 version, that has completely been scrapped. So we're seeing that now you need parental consent. And then in terms of comprehensive sexuality education, and I won't go further into it, is that in the 2014 bill, it mentioned that comprehensive sexuality education in its entirety should be provided to adolescents. But in the 2019 bill, you can see it's just completely been turned into focus on abstinence. It's sexuality education, but it's abstinence focused, which completely does not take into account the realities that young people and adolescents are facing. And for me, it's both professional and personal, because we know that from evidence what we see is that there's a high the sexual debut is early. Adolescents are having sex as young as 15 or even 10 years old. We're seeing there's a rise in issues of sexual and gender-based violence among young people, and in most cases they don't even know that they're actually being violated. So there's that lack of information to know and to be aware that, oh, I'm actually being violated and I need to take these certain steps to be able to report. And we're seeing that even within, when you're talking about HIV, which has been with us for a while, and even if you consider the fact that we do already have a curriculum that teaches a lot about how to protect yourself from getting HIV, and despite that being in place, and of course it's usually mostly abstinence focused, we're still seeing that HIV among adolescents and young people is still high, with 51% of all new infections in Kenya being among adolescents and young people. So I think for me, the aspect of addressing young people and adolescents' sexual and reproductive health needs is what is most important to me when I look at this bill.
I'll jump in, maybe piggyback on Maggie. I think this bill is seeking to legalize whatever is already happening. A lot of these things have been happening for decades, and I don't know if it's our cultural backgrounds, our religious beliefs, our societal norms. Then those have made us bury our heads in the sand, and now we are bringing a bill that's trying to legalize, or not legalize, to define what is allowed and what is not allowed in the context of reproductive healthcare. And these things have already been happening. The things that come out for me in terms of rights. So, right to access healthcare, and the right is for everybody. And then on the other hand, you want to say that, oh, adolescents can't access this, but you've just said that everybody has a right to access the same quality of healthcare. And then the other thing that comes out for me is obligations as well. So with rights come obligations. So obligations by the government, for example, to provide resources for healthcare at all levels, national level, county levels. And so we're talking about the obligations of the government, but we know what's happening on the ground is something very different. So Kenya is known for coming up with wonderful documents, beautiful policy documents, but the application of it. So I don't know if it's just another exercise in, just having another document and then let it gather dust on the shelf, or if it will actually come up. Bring something beneficial for everybody. And then just from the get-go, I, as a gynecologist, and also on a personal level, I'm a married man and I'm a gynecologist. So one important thing I've learned is never try to tell a woman what to do with her body. So that I think that will set the tone for my discussion today. Everybody has a right to their body, to decide what to do with their body, when to do it, and when not to do it. So no one can police anybody else, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe I can go next. It's always nice not to go last because everyone will say everything. Sorry to I think for me, I heard about the bill after I heard about the crisis around the country, just people discussing the bill and already taking sides around it. So already, by the time I was reading it, I think I've had a lot of different bias around it. But to me, it looks to me like a compromise bill. Comparing it to 2014 and 2019, it seems that some of the radical issues that people think let the 2014 bill fail are some of the things that have been removed, like the things of as Meggie mentioned, things around consent, or things that have been dropped around this bill. But I also see a broader opportunity to this because it seems there is a very interesting aspect that has been brought into play, that the virtue of it just being called a reproductive health bill, even before people read it, seems to be people already have opinions about it without reading the document itself. The section that I'm more interested in is, of course, the access to reproductive health services for adolescents. I'm definitely interested in that. Not necessarily because it has additional things. Of course, I'm a little bit sad that we have to have issues like consent. But in essence, the way the bill is structured, it's in a way that is it's putting the obligation on the different level of government to provide access to these services. So the young people, let's say people who are above 18, we are hoping they will still get access to these services, right? But they don't. But then the excuse is everyone will not concentrate on that virtue of them not getting the access, because the bill is likely to be shut down for a mere sentence that people want maybe the young people not to get access to these services, that it is promoting promiscuity and all different ways of looking at it. A different thing that I've realized about this bill is because the issues on surrogacy. I haven't really been privy to this a lot. It's always an interesting one because I mostly watch this in movies, honestly.
Yeah.
Most of the time, interesting movies. But there has been non-legal frameworks for instituting the laws that we have had as a country, and also this in itself is like an uncharted territory. And it's weird to see people still oppose issues to do with surrogacy, yet the parties involved are majors. None of them are minors. So it seems generally there's just an issue with anything that comes with the term being reproductive health as a bill in parliament. Even without reading it, there's already a prejudice. It's nothing to do with the age limits and the consent, the age of consent. People will just oppose it, it seems, for different reasons. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guess it's me now. I just wanted to listen in from the different professionalism and the personal level that each one of us had to say, because for me, I think my angle is different. And when I was reading through the bill, it talks about like access to the health facilities, access to information, continuous education, the right to access appropriate form information on family planning. And there's also about confidentiality about the data, or when you're talking to the person who's accessing the services. On safe motherhood, it talks about how the health professional should not carry out a sterilization procedure on a person. And on the part of adolescents, it says how they need to be friendly reproductive health services for them that needs to be inclusive. So I picked this point because for the community that I work in, which is the deaf, these rights are denied. And mainly it's because of the communication barrier. So when I read a document, a bill that talks about access, I'm trying to figure out, yes, that it's a good bill in terms of for them, but this could be an intervention measure as well as an opening ongoing discussion on how this can be implemented, especially for this community. Because one, in my capacity as a sign language interpreter, you now be called in last minute where, you know, you find a deaf lady, they were just given one form of family planning and they were told to go and when to come back. They were not given the choices and not they themselves making that informed decision. You have parents or caregivers who don't know sign language, so they don't know how to talk to their adolescent girls, and they put them on family planning methods because they think it's easier than having the talk. It's also spreading across hearing parents as well, where we fear talking to our kids. I don't know why, because also as a mom, I am a mom, I'm an auntie. I know that this discussion is our responsibility because when we say that CSC should be taught in schools, again, we are in, you know, arms and APRO. So where does it like, where are these kids supposed to get the knowledge, the adolescents, and you know, the right information? How are we going to go about this? Yes, this bill is here, but I think it just starts that conversation so that these gaps that I'm foreseeing in the bill we can close the gap right now instead of having it out there and then now we will be running all over the place and like I know everybody has their own interpretation of the bill because some things are left to that, to your own interpretation. So it talks about inclusive, but to what extent? Some healthcare facilities will put a ramp and think that's enough until a young deaf lady walks in and then they're like, oh, we need to get an interpreter. And then they consider that as an extra cost because other forms of disability, the other categories, like it's a one-off cost. But for the deaf young ladies and girls, it's continuous because you need to keep having a sign language interpreter. So like I said, this is just the beginning of a discussion. So does it mean that maybe sign language can be a curriculum that's taught at all medical courses so that at least that enables accessibility in all its full terminology? Or what are we discussing about? So for me, the lens is for the deaf girls, the women, and also for the other girls and women with disabilities, and how this bill really can start that conversation on how to always be inclusive when we're doing something with them in mind.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So the reason I decided to do this video specifically was because there was so much misinformation, and I am on a family group with aunts and uncles and, you know, cousins, and it was sent there, the petition, and everybody was like, yes, this is the anti-abortion bill, let's sign it. And I thought, it's so strange that the women on this group are opposing this when it has your reproductive health care. And for me, the truth is a lot of times reproductive health care falls primarily on women, and men are just left on the you know, sidelines. It's like they're not really involved. I don't know if that's by choice or by design, but it seems to me that a lot of times women will just, you know, say, okay, these people have opposed it, so yeah, they must be right. And when I went through it, it was so strange because I thought, why would you oppose it without reading? So I did a quick poll, and somebody asked me. I did a quick poll on the group, and I asked, so how many of you are for the reproductive health bill, or how many of you are against? And most of them were like, I'm against it. Then I asked, how many of you have read it? And it was just silence. And I just thought, it's so strange that you are opposing things that you don't know. Anyway, so I thought I should just highlight some of the misconceptions that there are out there. I wrote them. There are very, very many. And I thought it would be a good idea to just address them here. And you guys can jump in with whatever you want, because I think it's really important to demystify things so that people know what is true and what is not true. So one of the things I had was, this is a pro-abortion bill, that it just allows people to have abortion all willy-nilly, you know, until 36 weeks, which is not even abortion. But I just thought it's so strange because it's actually, this bill, like Meggie says, is more strict on abortion than the 2014 bill. So what I read, and please feel free to correct me on this, Kendi, but it restricts abortion to when the situation is incompatible with life, when you know, the health of the mother or the child is at risk, and health not just in terms of, oh, are you sick or not, but in the WHO definition of mental, emotional, and physical well-being. So if the mental health of somebody is at risk, then that is also grounds for abortion. I think a lot of people have a problem with that because in our society, we still don't see mental health as a disease. If you have a mental health condition, people will be like, oh, you know, drink water. Why are you stressed? You have a roof over your head. You have food. I don't know why you're stressed. So people still don't see mental health as a problem. And so they don't see that as grounds to have an abortion. And the other one was, you know, in cases of rape and incest, which is also contentious, although I'm not so sure why, because, you know, so that was one of the things that I thought was so strange. The other thing that I saw was that, let me read. The other thing that I saw was that this is allowing test tube babies. And I think that when people say test tube babies, I really think that people think it is a baby grown in a test tube and put in, you know, the uterus. I really do think that's what people think. But I think that, like Kendi said, one of the things we don't talk about in Kenya is infertility, and we don't talk about surrogacy, and we don't talk about alternative ways of getting children. And I was on Twitter the other day and somebody said, you know, if you can't deliver naturally, if you're thinking of surrogacy or in vitro fertilization, that's against the Bible. And I just thought that's so strange, because does that also mean that adoption is against the Bible? Does that also mean that any alternative way of getting a child is against the Bible? Which brings me to my next point. What do you guys think is the place of religious leaders in determining or influencing reproductive health care, and especially with regard to this bill? Because there's been a lot of opposition, especially from religious circles. What do you guys think is their place? Do you think they should have a place at all? And if so, what is their place?
Okay, I think so. A lot of points have been raised, and I'll start with just briefly mentioning the aspect, what you mentioned about termination of pregnancy, and the misconceptions which are going on with regards to the bill being the abortion bill. First of all, we just need to start by acknowledging that thousands of women are dying every year because of unsafe abortion. And we know that the more restrictive your abortion laws are, the higher the incidence and the higher the number of women who will be seeking unsafe abortion, because women will seek abortion if they want to, they will find a way. And unfortunately, abortion, which is a very safe, very common medical procedure, which will save thousands of lives, unfortunately, because they don't have that access, then they will end up using dangerous methods, using sticks, using coils, pipes, all these different dangerous methods just to get rid of the pregnancy. Because if a woman, again, has decided, I'm getting rid of this pregnancy, come hell or high water, they will find a way to get rid of it. And so are we offering them what is scientifically safe and known to be able to actually support them? And it's not just about terminating of a pregnancy. And I think that's where the issue is. It's looking at it comprehensively. The woman has to undergo counseling. The woman has to, even before making that decision, they need to be informed about that information comprehensively to be able to make an informed choice, to know what the consequences are should I decide to proceed in this way, and how to prevent it from happening again. And we don't also discuss that aspect. But and unfortunately, because of that, without that understanding, and that's how, like you're saying, people don't discuss these issues, and so you just tend to take what is, I would say, sensational, or what is, and you run with it without actually really critically questioning, okay, what does this actually mean? What is implied by this? So I think in terms of the termination of pregnancy aspect, first of all, it's not even allowing women willy-nilly. It's actually restrictive because it only allows it under. It's only in the case of an emergency, if the life of a woman is in danger, and in the case that the fetus will not be able to survive outside of the womb. And I think the other contentious aspect was the whole idea of conscientious objection, whereby if as a healthcare professional, I am not comfortable providing this abortion, I have an obligation, according to the bill, an obligation to make sure I refer this woman to a healthcare professional who will be able to provide that service. And I think that if based on what the misconceptions going around, all it says is if a healthcare professional does not provide, then they are automatically jailed. But actually my understanding, and Kendi can be able to break it down for us as a lawyer, and my understanding is that having that clause is to protect both the healthcare worker and the woman, because if as a healthcare worker, yes, fine, my values are that I'm unable to provide, then I've been told that it's okay, you don't have to, but all you need to do is make sure that the woman has access to somebody who can provide it. And therefore it protects me as a woman to make sure whatever happens, I have access to that service. So I think let me leave it at that for now, and then I'll come back to the religion issue, because I know that is an interesting one that I'm also looking forward to hear from everyone.
Specifically to Kendi on abortion, what are because a lot of people, one of the responses I got when I asked this was, so you're telling me if a doctor is not comfortable, me as a Christian, and I refuse to give this abortion, I'll go to jail for refusing to perform something. So what exactly are the implications on, not really implications, but what is the role of the doctor, and what are the, well, for lack of another, repercussions for failure to refer?
Now, well, first of all, let me go back a bit on what you were saying about the misconceptions and the role of the church, and just speak very briefly, because I have a lot to say about that, but I can't say it all today. When I saw that message, it was in a church group for ladies, exclusively women, in a church group, and it was posted. And then my first instinct was, I hadn't read this 2019 bill. So my first instinct was, let me actually look at this bill and see whether anything that is being said in this message is accurate. And I was shocked. And then when I told them, so of course I am the youngest in that group, but that did not stop me from just telling them that, what are you people talking about? So I told them that the message and whatever is there is an inaccurate representation of what the bill is about, and I'd encourage them to really read the bill. It's very short, it's 24 pages. So someone asked, can you elaborate it for us? And I said, right now, I'm not able to really break it down, but maybe in future, in maybe a podcast episode or a paper, I can explain it. But again, it's very short, it's 24 pages, read it. And someone commented in a manner to insinuate that 24 pages is too long for them to read. So to me, that was a reflection of how we are drawn away from laws and policies. We feel like we can't do anything about it. Let those people just stay there, make decisions for us, and then we'll just come and they'll apply to us, and that's it. And whoever comes and tells me whatever about whatever, I'll believe it. But we do not want to actually take initiative and inform ourselves. And this is why, and again, this is a mentality that is there a lot in, I'll speak about the church because I'm a Christian, is there in the church that people will come on Sunday and sit down and listen to their pastor, their priest, tell them things. And there's that lack of initiative to find out things on themselves, to learn things on themselves. So the position of the church in this case would be very instrumental in actually providing accurate information, because then the people who actually listen to these people, like these people in those positions of influence in the church, they listen to them and they listen actually wanting to understand, and they follow what they tell them. So it would be really, really productive if these people, like the pastors and the priests and such people, would actually inform themselves and provide accurate information without like misrepresenting the information to their bias, as as whatever they want to represent, because there's nothing non-Christian about the bill. I don't know about Islam, but if a pastor comes to church today with 1,000 congregants and tells them, listen guys, this thing is from hell, you guys will burn. If you don't sign this petition, you'll burn in hell. People will go home to sign that petition because they don't want to burn in hell, because their pastor said so, their priest said so. So anyway, they could do a lot if they actually wanted to. And also there's this other mentality of, I remember there's a time I raised this issue in a group of, again, Christians, and there was a social justice issue, and I asked, how come people in positions of influence in the church do not usually talk about this? And I was told, oh, it's very important to pick your battles. This was my actual reaction. Now, about the doctors who do not give the
refer. Yeah.
Yes, as long as it's an obligation under the law, and I don't see what the problem would be in just making a referral. I don't know how ethics how the ethics for doctors dictate, but isn't it part of providing healthcare by referring someone to a person who can provide the care that you're not able to provide yourself? I don't know if that has anything. Yeah.
It is.
So yeah, I think it can be approached even from the ethical perspective, and under the law they are required to do that. Now, I've not had a chance to look at I didn't really think about it, to look at the offenses bit of it. So maybe we can come back to it later after I get a bit of a look at it.
Okay. I wanted to ask this question to Dr. Obwaka because one of the other misconceptions that's going around, and I heard this on the news on Monday, is that, if the baby has a disability, you can just abort. And then I looked at the bill and it said incompatible with life. So can you tell us a bit more about that, and what situations would what health conditions would legally permit having an abortion?
So we go back to the issue of the definition of health. So health is not only physical, as you had rightly said. I mean, there's the mental component of it, and the other bit of it is the social component of it. So even if we're talking about termination of pregnancies, I mean, somebody's justly, it's a right to say that I can't afford to have a child now. There's a social component of it. Or if I have a child, I'm going to be ostracized from the community, or my dad is going to kill me. And that can literally happen, and has happened. People have been killed because of getting pregnant before they're supposed to get pregnant, kind of thing. On termination of pregnancy due to congenital anomalies that are not compatible with life. So it depends on how early they're caught as well, because typically you might get people starting their antenatal visits even as late as 20 weeks. Ideally, we're supposed to start around 8 weeks, 10 weeks, so we can do our early scans and we can pick up these things quite early. And then if they're picked up and say maybe you don't have like a major part of your brain that's not compatible with life, or you have half a heart, you'll not be able to survive, or you don't have the whole of your bowel as a congenital anomaly, then that is not compatible with life. So, I mean, it beats the purpose to go through the whole the whole 40 weeks of pregnancy, go through delivery, all the risks associated with that, only to have a child who will succumb after 40 minutes or 1 hour or 2 days. So I think in those conditions, I think we need to pick them up earlier. So the counseling bit is important. So I always encourage all my clients, if before you conceive, so we do pre-conception counseling. And in Kenya, premarital counseling basically is just to say, what are the woman's role in the marriage, the man's role in the marriage, how Christ can be in your home. But we don't talk about, genetic counseling. That's very important. So even for issues like sickle cell, with proper genetic counseling, we can eliminate sickle cell in 4 to 6 generations or so. And so the genetic counseling is important, and then fertility counseling as well. So that if there's any problem, it can be, because those are big reasons for strife in marriages, reasons for breakup. I mean, once you have a child with a very bad mental disability, for example, then it puts a lot of strain on the marriage. Or if you've been married for 3 years and you can't conceive, then the blame game starts, and that also leads to lots of divorces. Or you have a child and the child dies, then that has also been shown to contribute to that. So, I mean, from my end would be the premarital counseling, not only the church, the religious counseling that is a norm for premarital counseling, but also medical premarital counseling. So we can pick up on these things early. We can advise you how to take care of yourself so that we reduce the chances of getting those lethal congenital anomalies, as they are called. And then if it's picked up very early, then we do thorough counseling. So we even bring in a psychologist, we bring in a geneticist if we have to. We bring in a senior radiologist who can explain the findings of the scan. And then the decision, as I said, always has to be with the mother at the end of the day. It's not the husband, it's not the father of the mother, it's the mother herself. So some people would tell them that this is a situation and this baby won't be able to live more than a few hours after life, and they still choose to go on with the pregnancy. And that's their choice. That's perfectly okay. So for me, I still insist on choice, autonomy. And I mean, you decide what you want to do for you and your pregnancy. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to, because we're almost out of time, I wanted to talk about surrogacy and because that seems to be something that a lot of people haven't dealt with, or some people have never heard of it, because we, again, like Kendi said, did not have any policies in surrogacy. So again, to Dr. Obwaka, what is the meaning of assisted reproduction?
So assisted reproductive techniques, ART, is like an umbrella term for all these things. So whether you're doing intrauterine insemination, where you just introduce the sperm into the woman's reproductive system and then the natural process then proceeds, or if you're doing IVF, in vitro fertilization. So in vitro means in glass. So you're doing the fertilization in the lab, so to speak. And then once the embryo is formed on day 3, then the embryo is transferred into the woman to carry. And then that also covers surrogacy. So, I mean, surrogacy is just having somebody else carry the pregnancy for you. But the bill is very specific on who can access surrogacy services and who can't. So, I mean, in different parts of the bill, you also pick up on another burying your head in the sand statements about same sex and different sex. It comes up in bits and pieces. So again, we're still in denial that we have same-sex couples in the country, same-sex couples all over the world, and they want to have children as well. I mean, they are a unit in their own definition of a unit, marriage unit. So they also say that same-sex couples can't access surrogacy. Same-sex couples can't adopt legally in Kenya. Same-sex couples are illegal. That's just like saying, I mean, we all know prostitution is illegal in the law, but I mean, it does happen, and it does happen very, very openly. So I don't know why we choose to let some things happen, and then we choose to, to be very harsh penalties against some things. Surrogacy. So, I mean, ART is the umbrella term for all those different ways of helping a couple conceive. So it can involve one of the parties, can involve both the parents, or it can involve like an external party, like a surrogate coming in. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think I just wanted to clarify that because a lot of people don't really seem to understand what it's about. So basically the bill provides a framework and what I think are well written out policies on how it should be conducted, whether they should be paid, who stays with the child, if the guardian dies, or things like that. So it does what I think is a good job on making that clear. If anybody has any opinions, let me know, but I think it's well done. I actually think that's one of the, like Kendi said, that's a huge part of the bill, but it's also one of the things that is not talked about, except when we hear this bill advocates for test tube babies. So it's kind of just swept through. Nobody really talks about it, yet we know that we do have infertility. We do have a lot of women and men, families who are not able to have their own children and should be able to. I think that it's something that should be available to everybody. So
sorry,
the other thing,
just
yeah,
ask
yes.
you,
Yeah.
I'll raise something. So the bill also says who and who can't get. So you have to be unable to have a child.
Yeah.
And then they also put age limits to it.
Age limits,
I mean, you can't
yeah.
access surrogacy if you're below 25 or above, I think 45, if I'm not wrong. So, you said that it's accessible to everyone, but it's not. So, I mean, if you're 24 years old, you want a child and you and your partner cannot, then in Kenya, you cannot use surrogacy. So there's still restrictions to it. I don't know how they decided upon 25 to 45. I mean, if you're 50 years old, then you can't have a child. Shouldn't you be able to access surrogacy kind of thing?
Yeah. I think,
Yeah.
So just to be clear, I didn't mean it so much in terms of like, I meant it in terms of the way it's laid out is clear to read. But I also did have a bit of an issue with saying that you basically have to prove that you can't have children. And I thought, does that mean that if for whatever reason I don't want to bear my own children and my sister is able to carry my child, does that mean then I can't have a surrogate? Because it's very much, it implies that you have to be unable to do it. So I don't know, it just seemed, like you said, it doesn't really cover everybody, and it has still quite a bit of restrictions. I will say I do think it's a step in the right direction, because at least we're talking about it. We never used to have these conversations, and now we're having them. It's not the best, but I will acknowledge that it is something. Kendi, you had something to say?
Yes, another important thing about the surrogacy, the provisions about surrogacy in the bill right now is before, there were so many cases in court where the parties were not able to enforce the agreements because there was no provision for such agreements or contracts like surrogacy agreements under the law. So right now that there's an actual, like, the agreements are recognized, then it means that they are enforceable. About the age limits, I know now when it comes to matters of children, even like what is it called, foster care, you cannot foster a child if you're below 25 years of age. I think about the age limit is just considering the best interest of the child, because again, when it comes to matters children, that is usually one of the most important principles, the best interest of the child. So I'm imagining that the 25-year age mark on the lower side is to provide for a bit of financial capabilities and all that, stability, so to speak. And then on the higher side, I don't know.
55, sorry, not 45.
Yeah, it's 55. And again, I mean, it's still thinking about it in an open way. It makes sense that, it would be good for the child to not have their mom or their dad be a particular, like a very, I don't know. I'm just trying to be politically correct here.
We're exposing our stereotypes as well.
Yeah, of course I also have my bias, and everyone does.
Yeah, which is natural,
Yeah, I don't know if I was a judge sitting in such a case, when thinking about the best interest of the child, and I think the age limit makes sense, The requirement to prove infertility or inability to actually get a child on their own is a bit problematic. And again, it's a reflection of how the society we live in is very keen on policing the decisions that people make, and in this case women. And now it's gone like overboard. It's like, no, we can't let you decide how to give birth to your child. We have to get in one way or another and determine how you're going to go about it. And then when they're sending these messages, they end by saying, please let us save our children. Our children. Yeah.
A little bit strange.
A little bit strange.
Okay, I wanted to move on to the adolescent-friendly reproductive health services. Like I said, we won't go so much into comprehensive sexuality education because we'll cover that in the next video. I think that is a whole other topic on its own. But like Meggie and Bidian pointed out, this bill is quite watered down in terms of reproductive health services. So it starts with, I think the first point is mentorship, and then goes on to still have a very abstinence-based message, which is not a problem. But a personal story, I've had many personal instances. So when we were in medical school, Meggie and I, we did an outreach to a primary school here in Nairobi. And when we went there, we asked them, oh, we're here, we're medical students, ask us any questions. And I would estimate that 90% of the questions, and these were 8 to 10-year-olds, were all about, sexual health. And some of them, obviously by what they were anonymous, but some of them you could tell had been abused. Others had questions, nobody was talking to them. And the truth is, in a lot of our homes, we don't talk about sex. We barely talk about menstruation. So, talking about sex is a whole other thing. All the message you will get is abstain until you're married. And that's it. And yet we know that's not what happens. I was looking at the latest data we have, and the our adolescent fertility rate is currently 96 out of every 1,000 girls aged between 15 and 19, and that's not taking into consideration the 10-year-olds. And even just looking at the recent data coming from Ukambani, and I was watching the news yesterday, and they had this statistics from Kilifi, where in the between January and May, they had 3,000 teenage pregnancies. And I just thought it's so strange that we live in a society that says, don't teach children don't have CSE, don't allow children to access contraception, but also don't legalize abortion. And then when they get pregnant, you will just, be like, oh, it's so sad, the morals that we have. I think it's a bit strange. But I wanted to know what your views were on the idea that, because again, one of the complaints being raised is that this bill sexualizes children. And what's your opinion on that? I wanted to direct this to Bidian and also to Silvia, because you deal with a specific group of, it would be young people and then also disabled. So they're still a vulnerable population, sorry.
This is one of the most enjoyable discussions I like having. I definitely do enjoy this part a lot. This is because of it's very pretentious. It's a very pretentious discussions that we always hear when it gets to reproductive health and access for adolescents. For instance, on whether it promotes, it sexualizes the young people, right? Because you need to remember that even before this bill, in our 1980s and 70s, young people were actually gathered in groups to be taught more than our education actually teaches them now. They were literally being prepared to be married at that time, and they were merely teenagers, and it didn't seem to be a problem. And also the conversations about the religion and this, like the religion has never stepped up against early marriages during those times. It never stepped up against those things happening. It never stepped out against early pregnancies during that time. But then it's always a problem when a cap is put to prevent those things from happening. it's always something that it's tough to really realize what the religion is trying to protect. Because by preventing it, it's like they are comfortable with the status quo as it is. Anyway, back to the bill. So I think the senator is trying to get it passed by all means. This bill has been presented in Parliament, what I said 3 times before, and it failed. And this is just an attempt to sort it out in terms of the things that were rejected previously. Because the issue previously was on the issue about consent, and also the issue of socialization, on teaching a comprehensive sexual education, that maybe we are not ready for that. And she's tried to water it down, I think too much, yeah. But surprisingly, we'll still get some oppositions to this. However, I think I will get it as a win myself. I think if this bill passes, it's a win. It's like a step in the right direction, because then we are done with these basic things. And then we can get to start conversing about the next stuff. Lastly, it's so respect we deal with reproductive health awareness for teenagers, mostly in high schools, from 12 to 19. And each time we go there, the conversations that we have is, I think none of the children actually wanted to have conversations with us about abstinence. Because we do joint discussions and then we do group discussions where we have a hall about abstinence and almost nobody shows up. And everyone else, kind of questions that they ask you, in fact, they even have nicknames for contraceptives. Some of the nicknames that we have never heard of ourselves. So we end up learning from them. If they're not getting this information from us, then they're getting it from somewhere. So, I mean, we could as well just ensure they get the right information from the start. I think that's my take on this one. I could talk about this for quite a while.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Silvia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I'm a mom. My son is a preteen. And I know it's hard for parents out there to talk to their children about sex. And I remember even yesterday night, we had a conversation with my son because, of course, you can't just sit down your children and say, okay, let's talk about sex. No, but what I did was we usually watch this comedy show. So during COVID, I've been doing a bit of, back in the days, this is what I used to watch, this is what I used to listen to. So yeah, going back in time. And he really took on that comedy, but I specifically choose the show that people watch every evening. And yesterday, the show was about like one of the characters is 13-year-old, and she wanted to. So she likes this boy, and she was having this feeling she couldn't understand, but she didn't want to talk to her parents, so she reached out to the cousin, and the cousin just had no clue on what to tell her except no sex, young lady, no sex. But I mean, and that opened up a conversation after we watched the show, because I asked him. He openly tells me that one of his classmates already has a girlfriend. So I try to figure out, like, so do you have the same pressure? Do you also want to have a girlfriend? What for? So I think what the world we live in, how we were raised up was totally different than this generation that we see. They're always on social media. They learn things faster than when we used to, or when we found out or discovered about these things. So we need to face that reality. And that's why I even asked my son, the day you'll be ready for sex, where will you get the information from? And he said, I'll come and ask you, mom. And I'm happy that I've built that foundation so that will happen. When that time arises, that he will come to, because I want it to be that reliable source of information. And just like we have repeatedly said, yes, we want to put our heads under the sun and assume things, but it's happening, it's out there. So what are we going to do about it? Now, in the community that I work in, it's really, really challenging because, like I said, caregivers don't know sign language, so they're not able to talk to their adolescent children. And sadly, even during COVID, we've seen cases where deaf girls have been taken advantage of because they're deaf. They'll not be able to scream for help. They'll not be able to, even pinpoint who did that to them because, I mean, they're communicating in sign language and people think that they can get away with it. So as far as I look at the bill through the lens of, as a mom, as raising a preteen, being an auntie to girls, as a sign language interpreter in the deaf community, how can this bill, like I said, it's just the beginning of conversations that we're refusing to have. We really need to have them. This is 2020, honestly. We can't keep assuming things are not happening and these things are not being done out there. But I also feel that there need to be checks and balances. So for my case, like I said, I'm usually engaged late, very late in the stage. So I have to come in, try and figure out what really happened in such a situation, on such a case. And I think I've mentioned before where I've seen mothers, putting their adolescent girls on the pill because they're not sure what's going to happen. So they prefer that maybe they shouldn't, at least they should not get pregnant. But basically, I don't think we are saying that we're sexualizing our adolescents, just the environment that we are in. It's the technology that's out there that they're accessing through, and the talks that they're having with their friends. So if we don't do the right thing now, if we don't have the checks and balances right now, then we're going to face even worse numbers than what we just had recently in Ukambani and in Kilifi, and everybody trying to figure out, oh my God, like I said, I'm raising a son, and like you talked about, not many people are talking to the men because this is a cohesive thing. You can't just talk up to the girls and assume you're done. It has to be the boys and the girls brought to the table together. It's not a girl thing and a boy, it's together with the parents. It's all of us taking part and playing our role. Now, I just wanted to mention something about checks and balances because I have had a few cases as an interpreter where the mother decides for the adolescent girl or the woman, because they're deaf, that they shouldn't, have a baby and raise it because they're deaf, they don't know anything, and so they make the decisions that abortion should be done. And that's the thing. What sort of checks and balances do we have in this bill as we continue these conversations, as everybody is having their own interpretation of what it might be, as we're talking about influencers who might lead us according to their bias? What are the checks and balances? That for me is really key, so that we do the right thing from the onset right now as we go forward.
Okay, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you, Meggie, then Bidian.
So if I can just add on what Bidian and Silvia have mentioned, there's this idea of, one, I agree completely with the checks and balances that need to definitely be put in place. And Bidian mentioned about this whole idea that it's been watered down. And I definitely agree that it's been watered down. And unfortunately, what that is doing is, like they're both mentioning, is that it's just failing to embrace that we're in a changing context, and it's failing to embrace the current realities. And by not doing that, what it actually further does is that it further just withholds essential information. And this is not just information that is needed now, it's information that will be relevant now and in the future. And I think one of the things that is still not being accepted is that sexuality is part of human development. And no one can run away from that. It's a natural part of human development, and we need to be able to know how to be able to address it and how to be able to, based on the situations that keep coming. And the situations will be different from age 6 to age 18. And information from age 6 to age 18 will be different as well, depending on the different needs and situations that young people are being faced with. And I think, so that idea that by the opposition refusing to address this idea, and I guess like being mentioned, the religious body refusing to embrace that change is happening, you're only withholding information from young people, and that only increases the risk of unintended pregnancy, the risk of STIs and HIV, the risk of undergoing unsafe abortion, the risk of even sexual exploitation. And like Silvia mentioned, right now there's access to phones, media, and all these explicit images that keep coming and that young people don't know how to react to. And so for me, when I look at the bill, that clause, I think 32, if I'm not wrong, where it says that age-appropriate counseling, spiritual guidance, abstinence. I mean, it mentions drug abuse, and then there's consequences of unsafe abortion. So it just highlights such a short. It's not comprehensive enough, honestly, to be able to address what is actually currently happening. And I think even Dr. Obwaka kept saying, it only reiterates what is already happening. It's not adding, and especially for me in the aspect of the adolescent sexual and reproductive health, it's not adding any nuance to say that, oh, you know what, we actually acknowledge we're in changing times, and even evidence is showing us that, oh, we're in changing times, we need to now be more specific and more explicit, like Sylvia is saying. We rather than generalizing things, there needs to be maybe some form of explicitity that we mention, okay, this is what is happening. And I think as it is a step in the right direction, but it also would just, it might also not be as effective. It's not going to be effective by just only reiterating the same thing. And I think one thing which I also wanted to mention is, as much as, yes, there's been opposition from the religious body, I actually very strongly think the religious body has a very strong role to play. I definitely think they have a strong role to play, because they have a role to play in terms of providing accurate information. They have a role to play because if you notice in Kenya, faith-based healthcare facilities are where most people, people do receive a lot, they're everywhere. And that's where people access their healthcare services. We have faith-based schools. Religion is a part of our society, and they need to be part of these conversations. But again, the government needs to be that sort of gatekeeper to make sure that information is accurate, and that even the values that are being taught, because I think there's this notion that reproductive health steers away from morality and so on. But even if you look at what it's supposed to teach, it's about the aspect of just being tolerant, being respectful to other people, which is the same thing that religion teaches. So I definitely think that there is a need for the religious body to be part of this conversation.
Bidian, you had something to say here. Okay.
It's a very brief one. I just wanted to make it clear that there's this other part of the bill that got me too excited. That to say that additional, apart from the things that I mentioned, additional thing will be such other health services as the cabinet secretary shall determine. It's quite a very nice way to not really make a decision on anything, because the cabinet secretary cannot decide on anything. And they will just decide, the parliament will shoot it down, or the executive will not agree to it. It's not as if something can be decided in silo within the government. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about the bill, about this webinar, of course. I was telling him just about my preparations. And the problem is not that we are against age appropriateness. The problem is that we are against what they're using to determine what is age appropriate. A lot of things have been changing. And some of the faith-based books of faith, they are the same books. I don't think they're ever edited. They are literally the same books that my forefathers have been using. And therefore, they have never changed with generations or with all these experiences that we have had over time. And they never condemned these things then, and they're not going to condemn them now. Yeah, so I'm pretty much open to have a age-based, age-appropriate education within the youth-friendly services, provided we have an accurate data that actually tells us the majority of Kenyans get access to this kind of information at this age. Then we ensure that they get the right ones. Then I'm totally on board with that discussion. We'll definitely support that in any way.
Sorry, and just to quickly add on what Bidian said, I think there's that aspect of there needs to also be transparency, even with the bill. I think we were having a conversation with a colleague about the building bridges and how there are documents which have been converted to ensure lay people understand each and every aspect. And I think Kendi mentioned there's that notion that we are very far from law and policy. But if you see how the Building Bridges campaign has gone, they have invested all the time, resources to make sure people are fully educated. And I think this should be one of those things which needs to take that angle, that the government might need to just be like, okay, we need to also break it down to people and actually invest, because it affects, in the end, it's affecting people and not the government. So we need to just have that conversation, and the government needs to step up in that regard, I think.
Yeah. Just also to add on to what Meggie said, I remember when I was talking to Silvia about inviting her to the panel, and I asked her, have you read it? Said, it's so, I have read it, yes, but the community I work for, this bill is not accessible to a lot of people. And so just to add on to what Meggie has said, it's really important. I think it's interesting that when it comes to political things, that the government, the people involved, the politicians who are also the people in parliament and, you know, in the Senate, they will go out of their way to make sure that these things are translated into Kiswahili, Kisii, Luya, Kikuyu, into all of the different things and break it down for everybody. But when it comes to sensitive things like this that actually affect people immediately, that they don't do that. So I think in future, it's definitely something that should be looked forward, should change. I wanted to just add 2 things about the adolescent friendly reproductive health services. So when and people who are doctors in Kenya have gone through this. If you worked in a rural area, I did my internship in a very rural area, and it was a very morbid kind of joke that around August, September is when you would have a lot of pregnancies. And the reason for that is because there would be teenage pregnancies, and they would be specifically those that children who are conceived during the long December holidays. And I did my internship in a conservative area, and I thought we also got, so around that time, I did my maternity rotation during that period, and it was hell. I never want to go through anything like that ever again in my life, because we used to have so many complications. So we'd have ruptured uteruses and fistulas forming, and children. I remember once I got this child who was 13, and she came in at midnight with a ruptured uterus, and I've never been so scared in my life because I didn't know what to do. She's 13 and she got pregnant, and she had been married early. That's a whole different topic, but just the idea of that we refuse to give these children information, and then we also refuse to give them contraception, because these children are having sex. They are having sex. They are, they know a lot more than even I do. I have a sister who is 16, and I think her and her classmates know more at 16 than I did at 20. So it's a reality that we really have to face. Also, just to point out the other thing that a lot of times I think that the people who oppose this without reading it have the privilege to not have to think about it. I say this because, again, I was watching news. I've been watching a lot of news recently, and there's they were talking about how in Kibera there's an initiative for youth. I think it was in Kibera, but they were talking about how they had found, between January and now, they had found 30 fetuses of children, babies who had been aborted. And they interviewed one of the ladies, and she said, yes, it's true, people do it, and I don't think I judge people because I'm already struggling, and then in order for me to make money, I have to go out there and have sex with somebody. So if I do get pregnant, I can barely take care of myself. Why would I then go ahead and have a child? So it is, I read this somewhere. I read this on Trevor Noah's timeline. I like Trevor Noah, but one of the things, he was having a discussion with somebody, and they were saying that, and I agree, that opposing reproductive health services, basically from education to provision of contraception to abortion rights, is enabling a cycle of poverty, because studies have repeatedly shown that the people who are affected by these things are poor people. So it is the people, it's poorer children who will be pregnant because they don't have contraception. It's poorer children who will be affected when they can't go to school once they have that child. Children from richer families, you rarely see that they're pregnant, and a lot of times they do manage to get abortions. So and they do manage to get safe abortions. They have access to information. Their parents, despite opposing this, a lot of times will still go out of their way to ensure that they have an abortion and are able to go on with their future. But children from poor families are the ones who tend to have unsafe abortions, who tend to have no access to information, no access to contraception, and it just enables that cycle of poverty. So I just thought it was really important to point that out, because I think a lot of times when we think about this, we think about it's just me. We don't think about the people who are less privileged, the people who don't have as much access, who don't have as much money, as much information as we do. So just to wrap this up, thank you all so much. I just wanted to go around and ask everybody, what would you add or subtract from this bill?
Yeah, difficult question. Uh, so everybody is hesitating.
Yeah.
What should I add? What should I remove? I don't know, man. I think I would try to make things more inclusive, reflecting the reality on the ground, as we said. So we have to look at what exactly is going on and then now build that into the bill. If we are saying that a 16-year-old girl, she is sexually active, she wants to access family planning services, but I, as the doctor, have to get consent from her parent, then it beats the point. Then that's why they won't come. And then we wonder why they're getting pregnant. So I think if the bill could reflect the reality, then it would be the perfect document. But I guess it's what it is. It's the country that we live in, the times that we live in now. It's a foot in, so it's better than nothing. Yeah, so it's a foot in. We take what we can and run with it, and then now we just add as we go along. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, so I think I'll just add on that. I agree. One of the things I think I would change is, or rather want to see added, is that to bring back the idea of consent to sexual and reproductive health services for young people without parental consent, or just giving them that option. I also think I would definitely add in the aspect of comprehensive sexuality education. In addition to the spiritual guidance, the mentoring, the abstinence, and all that, in addition to all that, because both are important, but yeah, to further address the realities. And I think with regards to termination of pregnancy, and I know we as a country, we're making steps. And I think based off from the previous bill, at least they've added more aspects to it, because before it was just under the life of a mother was in danger, but now at least they've added the aspect for the fetus if they're not viable and emergency cases. So I think at least in that case, I would say we're going a step in the right direction, and that's something I am happy to see.
For myself, I think I would like to see an addition of, because it talks about accessibility. So I feel like accessibility for the deaf community means either the healthcare professionals are conversant in Kenyan Sign Language, or they have a sign language interpreter assigned to that facility, which brings me to the addition of having a budget or funding for this, because I don't want that to be used as an excuse of not being able to implement fully what is in the act. So full accessibility with funding.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, I'm very, very happy about the abortion section of the bill. I'm quite happy. It's not where I would want it to be, but it's a better place from where it is currently. So I would probably not touch it. Otherwise, if I touch it, it may just be rejected. So maybe I would.
True. Very true. It might go back the other way.
So maybe I'll just leave that. But what I would really push for, as much as possible, is access to information. As if it is totally impossible to provide access to services for teenagers without the consent of their parents, but at least they should have access to the information so that they are actually aware of, as much as they can't really access these things without the consent. But it's good that they should get the information so that then they can convince their parents to help them get that consent. Because now they don't get the information, and then you expect them to convince their parents. So I think there's a big imbalance in that aspect of the bill. And also, I've always, I don't know if it's just impossible. Maybe Kendi will try and clarify this for me. Oh, I don't know. Kendi has left. She's here. Maybe Kendi will clarify this to me afterwards. I don't know. Is it just impossible to interlink the reproductive health awareness and its education to education itself in high schools, like to the curriculum education? Because there seems to be no interlink, and all these things, the Reproductive Health Act, from the angle that it has taken a health aspect to it. Yeah, but there's also a very huge education aspect to it. I go to schools and you see we have youth-friendly services, meaning county government have accepted these things are happening and people have this access. You go to hospitals, they have data to show, actually, there's a lot of post-abortive care is allowed, even for teenagers, and nobody gets arrested for all these things. And they can treat issues of gender-based violence and all that. So in terms of health, they are somewhat accepted. The government is aware and has accepted that this is happening. But in terms of education, the Ministry of Education, it's like the Ministry of Education is totally not aware of what is happening in the Ministry of Health. They don't tolerate even the mention of some of those things. I don't know is it a problem that the bill cannot have both sides into it? Or I don't know what is the challenge. But if there's something I could change, then I could change that.
I think that's an important aspect. Meggie and I will be talking about it in next week's video on comprehensive sexual education. But for now, Meggie can give a quick answer.
So yes, that's a very good point. And there's always that disjunction between Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. However, there was a school health policy that was in conjunction with Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education that had been proposed. But again, it underwent the same opposition and it was highlighting aspects of sexuality education and how it links to education, and that health services for adolescents should be linked to school systems. But again, it underwent that opposition, and so it's still in this situation that the bill and everything else is in.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Kendi, what would you add or subtract?
On surrogacy, I think the requirement that the inability to have a child, you have to prove that it is irreversible and permanent. I don't feel like it's necessary. People can just choose to have their babies however they want. I think that's it. And then now generally, other than concerning the bill specifically, I do want to see Kenyans get more involved in the process of policy making and just be more involved in, I don't know, the process of governing themselves, because it would, if we were living in an ideal democracy, in a perfect democracy where our leaders actually represent our interests, then we can sit back, but we do not have that luxury. So I don't know, I would be really interested in seeing people actually getting excited about talking about things that are in the process of becoming laws, or talking about things that are laws already, and being more open to just informing themselves, getting accurate information. That way you're able to just know what to say about what and how to act in regard to what. Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, everything you guys have said, I would add more points on youth-friendly and adolescent services. I also think that having to get the consent, if you cannot talk about, like I said, a lot of people don't talk about menstruation. So if a girl cannot talk to her mother about menstruation, that same girl is not going to go and ask her mother for permission to get contraception. That's not a conversation that's going to be had, and that's definitely something we need to think about. Also, just in terms of making it accessible, I think I've realized Kenya is generally an inaccessible country for a lot of people, because not everybody is as able-bodied, and we tend to just not think about that. We just, like, you'll touch yourself out. So I think definitely that. And also on the surrogacy, I agree on everything you said. Yes, that's it. Thank you all for being here. For our viewers, I will link the bill in the description box and also more statistics. Thank you so much.